My name is Paul Provenzano. I'm with ebankIT, and I've been in the financial service industry, kind of like you guys, just working my way around from cores to payments to a variety of different digital technologies, from startups all the way to the big three. And just recently joined ebankIT, so that would have been February this year. And ebankIT is a global digital banking platform provider, so based in Europe, and really kind of an exciting path that they've been taking the last almost 10 years. And started in Europe, and I worked their way into Northern Africa, up through the UK, and then crossed the pond over to Canada, where now Canada is our largest market. And the platform is battle tested, and we're bringing it to the US. So really excited about the opportunities there.
Yeah, you bet. I'll tell you, man, if we just look over the years, Canada's an interesting proving ground, right? There's been a lot of stuff that's come out of Canada. I mean, even not just in fintech, but I mean, in technology in general, right? Thinking about, was it BlackBerry? Wasn't BlackBerry out of Canada?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right.
Europe is so different on their just how it all works, how the technology side works, and with open banking and all that. And then you get over into Canada, and you've got a little hybrid between there and the US.
That's cool.
A good spot.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was on a call actually earlier today with our Canada group. We had like a mini Canada user conference, and there's active open banking initiatives in Canada. The way that I describe it is, from an infrastructure perspective, a lot of the same requirements that you would expect in the US. A few different players that enable payments. International wires is big in Canada. So there's a few components and aspects that are a little bit unique, but it's an interesting hybrid kind of a playground in terms of what Europe is doing or has been doing, and now what Canada is embarking on. And they've actually have some of their own regulation that's coming out around open banking. So I'm sure the CFPB is watching that closely, which we're all excited about, right?
We're trying to kind of like walk the US into a voluntary, open banking ruling, and by consumer consent or something. So
I think you can see the precursors being set as we speak in the US, right? I think about the recent guidance. I mean, when you get three regulatory agencies speaking with one sort of a tri-party, that was interesting. And I think you have to have lived a little too much regulatory world to really read it right, but it's undertones that you can feel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All about just recently in the last 2 or 3 weeks, just they're just dropping little bombs of things.
Like 1033.
Yep.
Yeah. 1033 is another one.
And all of these things that are all coming together. And it's like, if you put all of that fence around where we're at now, and if all of that comes to fruition, that's big changes.
Yep.
It is. And I think it's, deer in the headlights, right? It's, what do we do with that? How do we enable it? And then what's the risk? What's the threat? It's kind of that whole SWOT analysis around open banking. And it's interesting having conversations across the industry. There's, you got the spectrum just like anything, right? You got the naysayers, never going to happen, not coming, to the other end of the spectrum. Yeah, we're ready for it, bring it on, we're trying to dabble in it, and then the rest of the world in between. And you try and navigate that, and look at what Europe has done, look at what Canada's playing with. Brazil is actually, I just read an article, Europe when it comes to open banking, so they just kind of leapfrog. So there's some interesting use cases, but I think in the US, it's a bit of deer in the headlights. What is this? Is it the light at the end of the tunnel, or is that a train coming at me? Right?
It's a great question.
You nailed something there, though, about, hey, I was number one of the naysayers, I think, because I understand the business pretty well, and to say this can happen, I'm like, not until this, and this happens. But remarkably, in the last few months, they're happening
quickly.
The convert.
Yeah, I mean, I think the possibility, obviously, I think will happen, no matter of when, and probably sooner rather than later. I mean, like I said about 1033, right? When we're in the comment period, clearly we're heading somewhere rather quickly. I think the question for me is, if you look at so
Yeah.
many other countries, to your point, Paul, that don't have certainly the depth and diversity and numbers of banks and community
Right.
and it's such a strong point in this country. And then you think about whether it's open banking or strangely enough, I see a lot of ties into BaaS and FinTech land.
Oh,
I agree.
And
oh yeah.
what we're all talking about there is like consumer choice and competition.
A year ago, I asked you the question, who owns the data, the bank or the court?
Oh, I mean,
Right.
okay. And today
That's
the
over.
question is who owns the data, the bank or the consumer, right?
Yeah.
And I think
Right.
that's to this theme of open banking that will clearly define that it's the consumer, right?
Right.
And allow or force, more likely, force the banks to make that available. So that
Yeah.
what you're really talking about, guys, is just like we all look at a technology conversion and the data files, conversion files we need. We're talking about doing that for consumers, right?
Right.
Talking
Yeah.
about allowing the consumer to get access to the data to basically do self-serve their own conversion, which you have to say is probably good for the consumer, good for competition. But the key question is good for the banks. A few of
Yeah.
them would be really good for, and the ones that are ahead of this game, and certainly for the BaaS banks, it'll be really good. For everybody else, I wouldn't be. Let me say this: I wouldn't want to be a retail bank in a couple of years.
Yeah. It's, I agree. I think it's going to be diversification is going to be important. I think, and you kind of alluded to the fintech. I think it's going to be interesting is we're going to see this kind of explosion of really niche, and I'm not going to say fintech, but tech enablers that bridge one industry to financial service. So I'll give you an example, like utility, right? So think about when you start a utility, you got to do income verification, some kind of proof of that you can pay, and that maybe put a deposit down based on that. Well, open banking, you as a consumer can release a set of credentials. Maybe it's a recent direct deposit, proof of direct deposit. Maybe it's 1 month's worth of spend history, and there will be technology enablers that connect utilities with the banking industry so that that proof of payment is immediate or credit worthiness, and electricity or power, gas, whatever that utility might be, is immediately enabled. And I think we'll see kind of just a explosion of these niche providers across just a multitude of industries that start to bridge that gap, which is from a consumer is cool, right?
Yeah.
When you go to McDonald's, instead of would you like an apple pie with that, it's would you like a loan?
Yeah, how about our McDonald's?
How about an loan with that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
I got two sides of my brain on this, right? You've got sort of the feature-driven fight. P2P would be a good example. Think Venmo and then think Zelle. Okay.
right,
The other side of the fight, I think, is like a loyalty and brand-driven fight or a trust fight.
right,
Banks, especially relationship banking and trust. My key thesis here is thinking about some of the brands like lifestyle brands. So let's say a Harley Davidson. Is a consumer going to be more into that, more trusted and more brand loyalty to that or to their bank? And it's like, well, there's definitely a group of people that would have more loyalty there and probably be willing to get financial services from Harley Davidson.
Paul,
Right?
what do you think about that? Do you think that the consumer is going to gravitate to point of sale and preferred methods there, or are they going to gravitate back to the trusted relationship?
Yeah, is it
with the bank?
fractional or is it loyalty? Because it's kind
yeah.
of
I think it's a good question. I think the loyalty is extending certainly, and the obvious examples of loyalty that way, Apple, Google, Amazon, a lot of these organizations, companies that are establishing transactional relationships. So I look at, what are the organizations that have kind of that ongoing transactional relationship that may be able to set themselves up for, a broader set, or a broader, Walmart, the major retailers as an example. So I think there's some natural extensions certainly to a diversified, banking type relationship. It could also, you look at, I look at the way that my kids, so I've got a 22-year-old, 20-year-old, and a 17-year-old, the way that they use financial services, even though they don't have a lot of money, the way that use it is very different than, the way that I'm using it. And I think what it's going to come down to is, from a customer centricity standpoint, is my bank or my credit union, my financial institution serving me the way I want to be served. And right. And so, the three of us all may have, one of us may be saving up for a house, and one of us may be saving up to buy a business, and another one, trying to put a kid through school. We got different goals, different motivations. Is the entity serving that customer in a way that helps them reach those financial goals? I think that's the culmination of, where a consumer is going to end up placing their trust.
Right. Yeah. It's really about journeys. And, if you think about there's some really cool niche fintech players out there right now, and things like, I heard of one the other day. There's obviously like BankMD, right, for doctors. Okay. I heard the other day that was for engagements, people getting married. So like wedding registries and like paying all the bills, hiring bartenders, right? I'm like, brilliant, because it's a journey focused, and it's still kind of a community of people. It's, a little different and cool. I really like that stuff, but it breaks away. It's that, I think you use a good analogy, which is point of sale as a theme, to kind of think about those journeys, sort of like indirect auto lending at a dealership, right? But if you think about that, it really is in contrast with our super app and banking theme, right?
Yeah.
The thing that scares me about, your point of the kids, I don't know if their centricity in their head thinks about financial services in terms of a chartered institution.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I agree.
Don't know that banks have done a very good job with the younger generation there, right?
That's great. They're thinking about what's next week. There's not a long term, at least, from what I've seen. Maybe once they get, 25, or, now they got a career and they're starting to save. But as they're, in school, finishing school, it's, listen, I got to get a job. I got to pay off any student loans. I got to, put money for a car down payment. But there's not, much of a long term view of that.
It's like journey to journey. I heard SoFi somewhere in there. I heard another.
Yeah, right.
If you're
that's exactly right.
About your financial relationship with your banker, there's something wrong.
You're
with
not very cool, man.
Yeah, you're not a cool guy at all.
Well, and so that's a great point, because that's a great point, because I think that's where open banking then comes into play. Is if I've got my student loan at SoFi, and I've got credit card with XYZ Bank, if I'm a community bank, and I'm enabling open banking, I can bring all those relationships into one view.
Yep.
So they can still have visibility into all of those. And now I become that kind of that central hub, that central point. But I'll tell you what, guys, what I'm observing is that before any of this there's like this kind of this data minutia, right, within financial institutions. I mean, data is so siloed. And it's living in so many different places, mortgage, consumer, business, commercial, whatever it might be. And that, in my conversations that I'm having now with community banks, community financial institutions, it's, you got to get the data house in order.
Right.
Because a lot of these things really you can't start to enable in a seamless way until that data is under control. And that's where I see a lot of focus right now. And that's coming downstream, I think, into more of the community financial institutions, but it starts with the data, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we were talking about that journey concept, the simplest use of what everybody talks about from the data perspective, it's like targeted marketing kind of got the bad rap for everybody, and it's more about not hitting somebody with an advertisement for an auto loan because they're about to pay off their old auto loan, but at the same time, it's kind of understanding those life journeys of people so that you can be engaged. And I think more like being a financial partner, as opposed to just thinking about advertising. And you got to get that stuff in order.
There's some interesting things that are still yet to unfold, I think. So when we talk about Apple or whatever, Google, or Facebook, are they going to be major players, or are they going to be regulated out of that field? All right.
Yep.
So there's somebody's got to flip the coin and make the call on that. Also got this availability issue where it's like, hey, Dave, I found out that an hour ago, and you do this every Wednesday at this, this is where you go and get a hamburger or whatever. Okay, there's a level out there to where let's call it privacy, to
Yeah,
where-
some is appreciated, but a lot's not.
Right. And then it's like, hey, we'd like to offer these new services if you unlock your privacy. Well, what level am I going to be able to unlock my privacy? Is it on off, or is it I don't want
Fractional.
people to know what I do?
Yeah. Right.
What enablement from that is going to
Right.
be accessible to and usable for fintechs and banking?
Right.
So there's a lot there to unpack and a lot to really figure out still. But to your point earlier, with the recent releases of some of these regulatory guidance things, it's
Yeah.
I know a lot more than I did an hour ago.
You
right?
bet. I'll say, Paul, to your point, I have heard a ton from the fintech and vendor community that's building cool things. There's definitely a lot of AI type things cool, but they've had success in the bigger banks. And so clearly there's a lot going on up there. They're
Right.
calling us saying, how in the world am I supposed to do anything in community and regional banks? We'd love to come down, but there's so many different core systems. Everybody's data that out of whack. Everybody's got a different chart of accounts, right? And
Right.
for them, it's very one institution specific installations, and
Yeah.
banking as a whole is a little tougher for them to get to. So
One thing I see a lot and I hear a lot is, the pontificators,
Yep.
they've got it all figured out. And
Of
so
course.
and they'll take that piece and project it across
Yes.
all of banking.
Yes.
And like you said, the big banks, small banks, there's remarkable differences of how a particular thing could work itself out here, or maybe it becomes a big consumer issue, or it's a super win for a community bank. BaaS banking is a great example of that. And I tell you,
Yeah.
every bank in the world, man, I would embrace that as fast as I possibly could, even if I didn't do anything with it.
yeah. Well,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the use cases, I kind of envision a crawl, walk, run to get the consumers to adopt it, get consumers comfortable with it. Even at the point that, let's say that there is, CFPB, open banking guidelines and regulatory rules that need to be followed, there still is a consumer awareness adoption element that has to be communicated. There's an education aspect of it. So, this is not I don't see it as an overnight, but certainly there's going to be a long runway here. I think the simple, easy use cases are going to be the ones that gain some consumer confidence around, okay, I really do own this data. Oh, I really have control of how little I can share and with who. And I think if that's the approach, that it's, yeah, I mean, if it's spoon fed and not buffet style, I think the consumers there'll be better adoption with it, more better acceptance with it. So it's interesting
when you look at the the various players in the space too. It's really interesting. I mean, you got to think Plaid is probably the answer to that adoption question, certainly to start.
Right.
And I bet we could run the math real quick and just say how much account aggregation and third-party fintechs has Plaid done, right? And how many, end user consumers have given them their username and their password to scrape speaking, right? And that's probably our baseline for adoption, right? People be comfortable for sure. And then I think to your point, from there we have a slow trickle, but that's a pretty big number.
So what do you guys do to kind of position yourselves for the U.S. market to take over the world, and where's your areas that you see that you can do that, and what do you do first?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So ebankIT, born in Europe, almost 10 years ago. Open API banking is just part of our core DNA. So that's what our platform is built around. So, our message to the market is, listen, as you're thinking about your strategy, as you're thinking about, not next year, because here's the interesting thing is, historically, if you look at the online digital banking market, Tanner, I know you were heavily involved in it for some time. I describe it as, kind of the 1.0 was, let's visualize IVR, right? We're just going to take whatever IVR, we're going to put it on the screen. 2.0 was, okay, let's add some transactional elements to it. Transfer, remote deposit, make it a little more transactional. And I think now the 3.0 of digital is really bringing it in is not necessarily what the platform itself enables, but it's what it can enable as an ecosystem. And so that's the story, and that's our positioning in the market is not only is the platform itself, but it's what it can enable from a marketplace, from a FinTech. I mean, we are out, looking for FinTechs that we can partner with and integrate in, that just bring, one, extra layer of capability, something that's unique, because we're all about a differentiated experience for the bank, right? We want each community bank that we deploy to look different than the next one, to have a different, because they all have a little bit different functional use, instead of the traditional templated version of change the color, change the font, and here you go. Now you got, digital or online banking. So that's, our story and our approach is and the message is resonating, which is great. It's great to hear. And I think the market is ready for that.
Yeah.
That was really interesting what you just said, because there's a few players that try this way, or they, we encompass everything there. We may employ a new feature or something, but it's for everybody. You're talking about a true marketplace where you got a menu of things that could be exposed. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think too, if you look, I do this a lot, Paul, as you'd imagine. I go back to 10 plus years ago and think about things we did and tried that were, womp womp. And I think about a lot of those, you probably learned, don't try that again, but probably half of the stuff I think about, man, that would have worked today.
Right.
That would have been huge today. Right. And so
Yeah,
a lot of all of us from the technology side have been a little bit ahead of, all of the banks. Right. And I think the community banks are pretty focused. It's always a bit of a thing that holds them back, I think, but they don't see the need or the real differentiated opportunity to go out and kick the shit out of the big banks.
Yeah.
Right.
right.
They look at
Right.
it like, well, JP hadn't done that, so I don't really need to do it. Right. And it's like
Yeah.
a good way to eventually lose. We don't want to chase our competition forever, And so I think that was a bit of a struggle. I think just for me, I'd be a little punchier today with it of, these are things that are going to happen and the big guys are going to do them in a few years, get ahead of them, and there's good opportunity.
Right. Well, and I think too, technology has come down in price and cost, right? The development, the sophistication, the innovation has increased proportionally. Some of the cost on that has come down. And I think, there are more things accessible to community banks than I think what they realize. And, certainly there's some of the Wild West opportunities, no question. But there's a lot of accessible opportunities for sure that, that they have at their disposal.
But it's like we're all sheep, and I feel like one too, man.
The two of you guys
we
just
talk
are
about
nailing it, man.
Yeah.
It's like, you're right. There are a heck of a lot of products, and I think they realize. You're also right that there's a lot of things that maybe wouldn't have worked at the time, but are really good ideas today. You kind of put all this together, and to your really good point of this is a good time to pow on the big banks.
Yeah.
Geography is not the end zone anymore.
Right.
And the French footprint of these people that went all over the country, and it's like, that was a huge advantage. And then the ability to merge with an investment bank or an insurance company, a mega bank.
Or buy layman, stuff like that.
Well, I can add that feature. I can add this feature. FinTech enabled. I can do a lot of things now in my little bank and go out with a footprint. It's a mindset that I think we've got to fight more than anything.
You bet. I think to Paul's point, thinking back years ago, I was always kind of surprised to see how much, maybe read only would be the right word, Paul, how much the users are looking for read only things. Like to come in and see their balances and transactions. 3 out of 4 logins, they're like, they're there for a minute. They want to see balances and transactions, and that's that. And so I think a lot of us, we didn't build and deploy capabilities too terribly far away from that because they often didn't work. But we originally did the card on off and later some other card management features. This was the first one that I sort of saw and felt where people were getting specifically with this in their pocket, allowing this to be a tool that they used in their journey of life. And when you think about having a card management feature on there, I can now use that at the grocery store. And I remember having this moment. I was like 20, y'all, right? But I had this moment, light bulb. Wow, this is the future, And to your point, man, I like your approach to let's be open to all these cool fintechs and find the kids in the dorm room with the cool widget, right? And plug them in. That's a good thing. Really good.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, as I'm talking with more and more community banks, there's they're trying to find a niche, right? You alluded to earlier that if it's your purely consumer deposits, consumer accounts, you're at risk. I mean, you got all your eggs in that basket. And so, how do you diversify? Is it, building out small business, commercial? Is it, trying to find that niche channel, that niche community, whatever it might be, and try and, be the best to serve them. And that's where I'm seeing a lot of these community banks are trying to find that niche way to service a customer segment and be really, really good at it.
Yeah,
and that's, try to build that loyalty.
Funny enough, if you think about it, like what are the areas that really scare me? Like I said, I don't really like consumer and retail. And I mean, there's just a lot of ways to lose open banking and choice and everything else. Same thing if you looked at sort of the merchant services side and the commercial side. The big guys is tough. I mean, there's a reason Apple partnered with JP for the card.
Right.
So I don't think the rest of us can hang at the top. Maybe it's the S&P 500, or a little bit smaller group than that. But those biggest guys is tough for community banks to service. But that middle, man, there's community banks do what, like 64% of the small business loans. And people like us, the business owners, you're going to get my retail, right? And my wealth management and everything else. And I know I'm going to have to give you a call, but I know you, and I'll drive my ass down there. I don't care. Right. And so there's that small town relationship theme with small businesses that might be the holy grail. They can really hang on to it and push into it.
Yeah. And I think servicing, then the service, once you get, your clients, you get your customers engaged. I was with a client of ours in Portugal. He's in Portugal, but I was with him this past week. And he was taking me through his app, the app that they use. And I mean, they have built in a full service, self-service buy option. What I mean by that is you go to a portion on their app where, it services, and you can on the fly, get a car loan, get a line of credit, open a checking account. I mean, right there, get a line of credit and get it funded, approved and funded. So I think also, an opportunity in the U.S. community space is turning your app into a marketplace to sell your service, sell and fulfill your services, right? I mean, you've got the customer, they're in your digital branch, sell them something, right? Sell them something that they want when they need it.
They're in your digital branch. Yes.
Like, why am I sitting here thinking about open banking and being fearful for community banks when they have every product you could ever think of, right? And I mean, to your point, it's not pushing it and using it and getting that sort of strategic relationship with all your customers.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a small business and I'm out shopping for some office furniture and see something that, man, 10 grand, go into my bank app, ask for a line of credit, 10 grand right there on the spot, get it funded. And in my account, and away I go, whether it's line of credit or added to, bank credit card. So that's a big thing too, is, marketing, sales, servicing, all within, kind of that single service experience. So I think that, talk about loyalty, talk about retention, talk about upselling. It's, I think it's available and it's there. We just need to get people comfortable with that.
Well, and certainly for your more sophisticated customer base, I mean, maybe sophisticated is the wrong word. For anybody who has any money that's not paycheck to paycheck, right? I think we're going to lose that group of people. And likely, if we'll all go back to underserved, underbanked, all those things, I know that it's unpopular to say, but there's a reason the banks don't go after the people that don't have any money. Sorry, I said it. Cool. Those people are going fintech land and use case app specific. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's yet to be determined if that translates to more affluent people, right? And people that want a holistic relationship.
Make no mistake, the fintech guys have an opportunity to really kick a lot of ass here. But if you don't do better, if I call an 800 number and I don't get the extreme level of service that would be necessary to satisfy me, I will not do business there. And I have been ripped off before by the fintech, Coinbase. And you get into a loop of, well, now fill out this form, and then it takes you back to the 800 number. I'm like, can't and take care of my. And then when I do, they don't have the authority to do it. And don't worry, somebody will call me. Right. And
Yeah, right.
you don't elevate that game to, I mean, tenfold what you would think of
Right.
Excellent customer service. They're never going to hold on to the bigger dollars,
Right.
but you are
Yeah.
right. The convenience and speed. You know, what was it, Janis Joplin? You got nothing to lose, right?
Hey, it worked out
And-
for her.
Right, man.
Sorry.
But
Too soon?
Paycheck to paycheck, I think is your point.
Yeah.
But when you say, okay, now I'm accumulating my retirement, or I'm accumulating some assets, and I maybe want to get a line of credit against those assets. I mean, there's a lot of more sophisticated game that if anything's wrong, and I can't get somebody to service me, that is a serious problem.
I think what you're saying is the more expansive super app style theme makes a ton more sense to the people that are the customers that the banks want.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, and the
agree.
people that the bank want to keep.
He said that, didn't he?
I do. I agree
He's
today.
gonna turn around one day when I say,
I may
thought
change
that
my
up," he'll say,
mind,
"No,
man."
I thought that.
Don't worry, we got it captured. We know who said it, right?
You got me.
But yeah, I think it's the people that the bank want to keep too. I think they need to retain that stickiness to those, to those valued customers. So, and especially, listen, I think this younger generation is being overlooked. I think it's, being discounted. And that's, the wealth in this country is, that's that next group, right? 10 years, 15 years, that's where the wealth is going to be. I mean, the salaries that these kids are getting now coming out of college, it's crazy.
I got a news flash for all the young guys out there. You will not be there forever.
Yes.
And
That's right.
we talk about things like banking and their appeal at this, and people don't have trust in banking. It's like, well, what bank were they talking about?
Yep.
And so I think the community bank market has got such an opportunity if they would really grab onto this and build that out. And you're right, these young people, I remember kind of laughing about Chime, thinking, well, what are you gonna do with a bunch of college kids? Well, they didn't have their medical degree and their lawyer degree and make a lot of
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Or they went right on to entrepreneurs and started businesses and sold the business and started the business and sold the business. So
I'll tell you what, I think about just the conversation we've had here today, and it's something he and I discuss a lot of. I don't have to know anymore about what you guys do. Just having a cool conversation with you and seeing your perspective. And when it comes to the sales side of just all of these different cool companies, if you can attract the sharpest, most interested people to the sales side, it's because they believe in the product. So I think you did a good job showing that today, man. I had a really cool conversation, but I do want to give you final thoughts, man. Anything else that's on your mind? Any other topics? What's going on?
Green Bay,
man. Well, so little known fact, I live in Atlanta, but born and raised Wisconsin boy. So you can take the boy out of Wisconsin, but you can't take Wisconsin out of the boy. So big Packer fan. We'll see. I'm actually, optimistic, cautiously optimistic, but fearful I'll be reliving the 80s again. So
yeah. Hey man, I'm a Cowboys fan. I get it.
We get it.
But no, I mean, this has been great. I've enjoyed chatting with you guys. I appreciate the opportunity just to talk shop a little bit. And we're excited. We're really excited about the opportunity ahead. Completely vested in the community banking community and looking forward to cross and paths again.
Awesome, man. We appreciate you, and we're going to track your progress, man. So keep it
Yeah,
up.
please do.
Let us know when you hit Austin. We'll hang out.
Yeah.
You got it. All right. Thanks, man.
See you next time.
Take care.